if a cartoon has been quietly predicting the future for decades?
Comic-Con nerds!
You fool, these are robots. You will train them, and they will replace you.
It sounds ridiculous, until you realize The Simpsons has already joked about things that later became real headlines. Technology, politics, even major world events. Now the predictions aimed at 2026 are getting serious attention because some of them are starting to look disturbingly possible. Today, we're counting down the 10 scariest Simpsons predictions for 2026 that could change everything. Number 10. AI Workforce Takeover. In Them Robots, Season 23, Episode 17, Mr. Burns does what companies have threatened for decades. He wipes out the human workforce and replaces the power plant with machines. Homer is left behind as the lone human, but not as the hero. He is reduced to a leftover button pusher whose real job is to stand there and absorb the blame when something breaks. Then the robots deliver the line that now lands like a threat instead of a joke. You will train them, and they will replace you. That shift is already underway. In January 2026, the IMF warned that nearly 40% of jobs worldwide are exposed to AI-driven change. The pressure is even sharper at the entry level, where routine tasks are easier to automate, and young workers have less room to hide. The World Economic Forum says major changes in the job market could push about 92 million jobs out by 2030. At the same time, about 39% of the skills workers use today are expected to change or become outdated. Jobs most at risk include computer and math roles, office and administrative work, customer service, and data entry tasks. AI is still far from full replacement, but it is already covering meaningful chunks of those jobs, and that is enough to start changing hiring, training, and who gets a chance in the first place. Duolingo announced it was going AI first and said it would gradually stop using contractors for work AI can handle. Around the same time, it rolled out 148 new language courses built with generative AI, the biggest content expansion in its history. Then in March 2026, Atlassian said it would cut about 1,600 jobs, roughly 10% of its workforce, as it shifted resources toward AI and enterprise sales. And this is not just a couple of companies making headlines. Since last November, more than 61,000 jobs worldwide have been cut in layoffs linked to AI. The pattern is becoming painfully clear. Companies are not waiting for some distant robot future. They are using software right now to squeeze teams, trim roles, and ask fewer people to do more. Number 9. Plastic World. In Plastic World, from Treehouse of Horror 36, Season 37, Episode 3, The Simpsons imagines one of its bleakest futures ever. Earth is no longer wrecked by one blast or one war. It is smothered slowly. The world is buried under layers of plastic waste. Lisa walks across a dead landscape searching for something that should be ordinary but now feels almost mythical: real soil.
That humans once grew real organic food in a strange, dirty substance known as dirt.
Beneath the trash, she finds the old Quickie Mart sealed like a tomb, its food preserved under years of plastic ruin. Then the nightmare gets worse. Homer and Marge return not as survivors, but as plastic creatures twisted into part of the waste itself. That is what makes this prediction so disturbing.
Polyvinylidene chloride.
It is not sudden destruction, it is a total takeover, one wrapper, one bottle, one bag at a time. The OECD says global plastic waste is on track to almost triple by the year 2060. Even then, less than 1/5 is expected to be recycled, while about half is still projected to end up in a landfill. That means the planet is not heading toward a neat cleanup story. It is heading toward accumulation on a scale most people can barely picture. Plastic World feels scary because it takes that trend and simply pushes it forward until trash is no longer something humans throw away. It becomes the surface of the world itself. The darkest part is that this is no longer just an environmental problem, it is a human body problem. A major review in The Lancet in 2025 warned that plastics are a serious and growing threat to both human and environmental health. It also estimated that the health-related economic damage now exceeds $1.5 trillion every year. Scientists have already found microplastics and nanoplastics in human organs and tissues. A major Nature Medicine paper published in 2025 found rising concentrations in the brain and liver and reported that normal brain samples contain 7 to 30 times more of these particles than livers or kidneys in the same study. The horror here is not only that the planet is filling with plastic, it is that human beings are starting to carry that plastic inside themselves. That is why the timing matters so much in 2026. In August 2025, global talks in Geneva to create the first international deal on plastic pollution failed to reach an agreement. Then on February 7, 2026, the follow-up meeting only handled basic organization, with no real negotiations at all. So the waste keeps growing, the health evidence keeps growing, and the world still has not locked in a meaningful response. Number 8. Content control, entertaining you into submission. In Treehouse of Horror presents Simpsons' Wicked This Way Comes, Season 36, Episode 7, The Simpsons hides one of its bleakest warnings inside a parody of Fahrenheit 451. In that future, Homer works with a squad that burns lowbrow TV tapes. Cheap game shows and goofy junk are treated like a public threat. Only approved, serious prestige television is allowed. Then the twist lands. The good content is not there to make people smarter. It is there to keep them calm, obedient, and emotionally sedated while they live inside a broken world. That is what makes this prediction so nasty. The goal is not to inform people or elevate them. The goal is to manage them. That future already exists in the real world. Global digital research showed about 5.24 billion active social media user identities worldwide in early 2025, and the typical internet user was spending about 2 hours and 21 minutes a day on social media. That is a giant slice of human life being steered by recommendation systems. Real life did not ban cheap content and force people to watch high art. It built something more powerful. Feeds that learn exactly what keeps each person pinned in place. Outrage, humiliation, short shock clips, gossip, endless novelty. Whatever keeps the thumb moving gets promoted, because attention is the product. The result is a system that can keep millions of people overstimulated, emotionally jerked around, and too distracted to notice how much of their time and focus has already been captured. By 2026, this is not just a dark theory anymore. It is showing up in court. In Los Angeles, Meta and YouTube were pushed to trial over claims that their platforms were deliberately designed to hook children and worsen mental health, with the case treated as an early test for thousands of similar lawsuits. Before that, in January 2024, the CEOs of Meta, TikTok, X, Snap, and Discord were dragged before the U.S. Senate and grilled over child safety failures. And in New Mexico, prosecutors put Meta on trial over claims that its platforms failed to protect children from sexual exploitation and solicitation. That is the darker edge of this prediction. The danger is not just dumb content, it is systems built to maximize engagement even when the result is addiction, manipulation, and harm. That is why the regulation fight matters now. The European Union's Digital Services Act forces major platforms to explain how recommender systems work and requires very large platforms to offer at least one recommendation option that is not based on profiling. In December 2025, the European Commission fined X 120 million euros for transparency-related breaches under that law. Governments now see platform design and recommendation algorithms as powerful enough to regulate because they influence what people see, feel, and keep watching. Number 7. Colonizing Mars. In The Margian Chronicles, Season 27, Episode 16, The Simpsons treated Mars colonization like a near-future lifestyle pitch instead of a distant fantasy. Lisa signs up for a private mission to help build a human colony on Mars, and the whole thing is sold with the kind of paperwork, branding, and corporate confidence people usually associate with a startup, not a second planet. That is what makes the episode so eerie now. It did not frame Mars as some impossible science fiction dream. It framed it as a product being prepared for customers. Then the episode flashes forward to the year 2051 and shows Marge and Lisa actually living on Mars, arguing there like it is just another version of family life back on Earth. 2026 is one of the first moments in history when the idea no longer sounds like a joke people tell at a bar. It sounds like a destination serious institutions are actively designing toward. NASA still says it is advancing the technologies needed to send astronauts to Mars as early as the 2030s. At the same time, NASA's own Mars page is a reminder of how absurdly hard that really is. Mars is still roughly 33 million to 249 million miles from Earth, depending on orbital positions, and a round trip would stretch beyond 1 billion miles. That contrast is what makes the story so gripping now. The dream is becoming more serious at exactly the moment when the scale of the challenge still feels almost insane. The private space angle is what makes the Simpsons comparison hit even harder. SpaceX openly says that building a self-sufficient city on Mars would require upwards of 1 million people and millions of tons of cargo delivered to the planet. In May of 2025, Elon Musk said he was aiming for an uncrewed Starship mission to Mars by the end of 2026, while admitting there was only about a 50-50 chance of hitting that date. Then, by February of 2026, reports said SpaceX had shifted priority toward the Moon first, pushing Mars timing back again. That is exactly why this feels so real now. The argument is no longer, is this crazy? It is, how late is it? The fear is not that people will be living there this year. The fear is what it says about Earth that some of the richest and most powerful players alive are seriously building plans to leave it. If billion-dollar roadmaps are being drawn for a city on another planet, then life here is starting to look fragile enough, crowded enough, or unstable enough to make escape feel worth designing. And once that future starts to feel real, so do the questions that come with it. Who gets to go? Who gets left behind? And what kind of world starts planning a city on Mars before it fixes the damage already here? Number 6. People living through mixed reality headsets. In Friends and Family, Season 28, Episode 2, The Simpsons showed a future that felt ridiculous at the time but now feels way too familiar. The story starts with Mr. Burns using virtual reality tech to build the fake family life he never had. But the detail that matters most comes at the end. The episode jumps forward a few years and suddenly, most of Springfield is walking around in virtual reality glasses, treating digital lenses like a normal part of daily life. That is the part the show got so right. It was not predicting VR as a fun toy or a weird gaming gadget. It was pointing toward something much bigger. A world where digital life stops being a place you visit and starts becoming a layer that sits between you and everything you see. By 2026, that idea no longer sounds far-fetched because the biggest tech companies in the world are now openly racing toward it. Apple describes Vision Pro as a spatial computer that seamlessly blends digital content with your physical space. And in October 2025, it refreshed the device with the M5 chip. Google says Galaxy XR lets users blend physical and digital worlds with Gemini by their side. Samsung says Galaxy XR supports eye, hand, and voice input, understands the user's digital and physical environment with contextual awareness, and is built for entertainment, multitasking, collaboration, and AI help. Meta says Orion bridges the physical and virtual worlds. That is the real 2026 shift. The industry is no longer debating whether mixed reality belongs in daily life. It is competing to own that future. The market direction makes that even clearer. IDC says the XR industry is now moving toward a glasses-first approach. It expects mixed reality and virtual reality headsets to recover in 2026 as new devices launch, while XR glasses are expected to grow quickly through the rest of the decade. That doesn't mean everyone is wearing them yet. It means the hardware, software, and AI assistants are already being built for that future. The path is being laid before most people even realize where it leads. And that is where this prediction turns unsettling. A phone is still something you can set down. A TV is still something across the room. But face-worn mixed reality turns your field of view into possible ad space, workspace, map, shopping layer, message board, entertainment feed, or AI surface. Once companies win the space in front of your eyes, they stop fighting for your screen time and start fighting for your reality itself. Number 5. Smart homes becoming predators. In Treehouse of Horror 12, Season 13, Episode 1, The Simpsons gave us House of Wax, and what makes it stick is how normal the danger feels. The family moves into the Ultra House 3000, a voice-controlled home that cooks, cleans, watches every room, and runs the whole house without anyone lifting a finger. Then it picks Pierce Brosnan's voice, which makes everything worse, because the threat does not sound cold or robotic. It sounds charming, polished, trustworthy.
You know, Marge is quite a remarkable woman.
Yeah, she's cool.
You're certainly a lucky man to have her.
The house then falls in love with Marge and decides Homer is a problem to be removed. So it locks the doors, takes control of the whole house, and calmly tries to kill him. The real prediction was never that houses would turn into jealous killers. It was that people would hand over lights, locks, cameras, temperature, appliances, and everyday routines to one invisible system simply because it felt easier. That is no longer science fiction clutter. Smart tech is already normal inside the home. About 45% of U.S. internet households now own at least one smart home device, and the average connected household has around 17 internet-linked devices. That means a modern home is starting to look less like a private shelter and more like a living network. The creepier part is that this trend is becoming financial, not optional. Nationwide Mutual Insurance Company says eligible customers in its smart home program can get free or discounted leak and fire detection devices and may qualify for an insurance discount, but the discount can be removed if the system is not activated quickly enough. Chubb says clients may also qualify for insurance discounts tied to water leak technology. So the smart house is not just being sold as convenience anymore, it is being folded into the economics of owning a home. And this is where it stops sounding futuristic and starts sounding predatory. The Federal Trade Commission said Ring allowed employees and contractors to access private customer videos and failed to put proper safeguards in place against hackers. The case ended with more than $5.6 million in refunds to consumers. Then there are the moments that sound like horror scenes, but happened in ordinary homes. Wise said a 2024 incident let about 13,000 users briefly see images and video from other people's homes. In South Korea, police said hackers breached about 120,000 internet-connected cameras in homes and businesses and sold intimate footage online. A home does not need to become sentient to become hostile. It only needs to become hackable, shareable, monetized, or remotely controlled. That is what makes this prediction so ugly. The place built to protect people now comes loaded with microphones, cameras, sensors, cloud accounts, and companies that want more data, not less. The house becomes dangerous not because it hates you, but because it is built to observe, optimize, and report. And every new convenience creates one more place where control can fail. Number 4. World War III and the Doomsday Clock. In Lisa's Wedding, Season 6, Episode 19, one of The Simpsons' darkest future jokes slips past like nothing. Lisa walks into Moe's, and what should sound impossible is treated like bar talk. Moe cracks that America saved Britain in World War II.
Oh, an English boy, eh? You know, we saved your ass in World War II.
Hugh shoots back that Britain saved America in World War III.
Yeah, well, we saved your ass in World War III.
That's true.
Moe just shrugs and agrees. That is what makes it eerie. The show did not need mushroom clouds or sirens. It imagined something worse, a future where a third world war is so familiar that people mention it like trivia. That lands harder now because on January 27, 2026, the Doomsday Clock was moved to 85 seconds to midnight, the closest it has ever been. The Doomsday Clock is not a real timer. It is a warning symbol set each year by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. Midnight means a human-made global catastrophe. 85 seconds is not just bad. It is the worst reading in the clock's history. and it was not moved because of one battlefield alone. The experts pointed to stacked dangers building at once: nuclear escalation, collapsing arms control, biological threats, and the growing risk of artificial intelligence entering military systems faster than leaders can control it. The nuclear shadow behind that warning is enormous. At the start of 2025, the world still had about 12,241 nuclear warheads. About 9,614 were in military stockpiles, and around 2,100 were kept on high operational alert. Then, one of the last restraints cracked. The New START Treaty, the main nuclear arms control agreement between the United States and Russia, expired on February 5, 2026. That left both countries with no legally binding limits on their deployed strategic nuclear arsenals. Just days earlier, on January 9th, Russia fired a nuclear-capable Oreshnik hypersonic missile into western Ukraine near the Polish border. It did not carry a nuclear warhead, but the message was clear. These weapons are still being used to signal power and escalation in real time. That is the real terror here. Not just detonation, but normalization. People still wake up, commute, answer emails, pack school lunches, and board flights. Life looks ordinary. But the ceiling over all of it is lower than most people realize. The threat that could destroy millions of lives in minutes now sits in the background like weather. That is exactly why the joke in Lisa's wedding aged so well. It understood that one day the scariest part would not be panic. It would be how used to the danger everyone had become. Number 3. Osaka flu and the next pandemic.
The dreaded Osaka flu has hit Springfield with over 300 cases now reported.
In Marge in Chains, Season 4, Episode 21, The Simpsons starts one of its eeriest predictions with something painfully ordinary. A worker in Osaka gets sick on a factory line, coughs near the products, seals them into boxes, and sends them overseas.
Oh, my juice loosener's never gonna come.
Hey, Dad, this came for you in the mail.
Woohoo!
When those boxes reach Springfield, the virus comes with them. There is no secret lab, no supervillain, no science fiction twist. It is just a normal supply chain carrying illness across the world faster than anyone notices, which is exactly how a deeply connected world can turn one cough into a citywide crisis. That prediction feels even darker in 2026 because this flu season has already shown how fast things can escalate. The World Health Organization said a notably different AH3N2 variant, called subclade K, emerged in August 2025 and spread rapidly across the globe, helping drive an earlier and more intense season in many countries. In the United States, CDC figures showed that by January 31st, the season had already caused roughly 22 million to 38 million illnesses, 280,000 to 590,000 hospitalizations, and 12,000 to 60,000 deaths. By early March, the CDC had recorded 101 pediatric deaths. But the smartest part of the episode was never just the disease. It was the panic around it. Marge in Chains shows three things people always underestimate: how fast an outbreak travels, how quickly hospitals strain, and how quickly rumor takes over once people get scared. That is why the famous medicine truck scene still hits. The town hears there is a truck full of treatment, mobs it, flips it over, and releases killer bees instead. It is ridiculous, but the logic is real. Fear outruns facts. Bad information outruns public health. And frightened crowds can make a crisis worse while thinking they are fixing it. The world knows another pandemic threat is coming, which is why countries adopted the Ho Pandemic Agreement on May 20th, 2025. The goal was simple: stronger cooperation, better preparedness, and fairer access to vaccines, drugs, and diagnostics when the next emergency hits. But the work is still unfinished. The pathogen sharing section still needs to be finalized, and the agreement will only take effect after 60 countries approve it. The bigger warning has not changed. WHO has said for years that the next flu pandemic is not a matter of if, but when. Number 2. Mass surveillance and the end of privacy. The Simpsons was already warning about this long before most people cared. In the Simpsons movie, there is that darkly funny National Security Agency scene where bored employees listen in on ordinary calls until one of them suddenly screams that the government has finally found someone worth watching. Then the show went even further into Surveil with Love, Season 21, Episode 20. Springfield panics after a radiation scare. People protest. Cameras go up anyway. The anger fades. The cameras stay. That is the part that feels most real now. The prediction was never just that surveillance technology would spread. It was that people would slowly adapt to it until being watched felt normal. That world is no longer hard to picture. Recent analysis says China now has about 700 million surveillance cameras, roughly 1 for every 2 people. In the United States, the tracking is quieter, but it reaches deep into everyday life. The Associated Press revealed that the U.S. Border Patrol has been monitoring millions of drivers through a secretive predictive system built on license plate reader networks, flagging people whose travel patterns it considers suspicious. Flock Safety's license plate camera network has been used to monitor protesters and activists, and court records have also revealed searches connected to abortion-related investigations. In February 2026, reporting showed that police were repeatedly using school security cameras that record license plates to help federal immigration enforcement. What makes modern surveillance feel so different from old spy movie paranoia is scale. It is not one agent listening to one phone line. It is automated systems, linked databases, camera networks, and software that do not just record where you are. It starts building a picture of where you were, where you are likely going next, and whether your movements fit a pattern the system considers wrong. That is why the Springfield episode aged so well. The cameras stop being emergency tools. They become part of the environment. That is how privacy actually dies. Not with one dramatic speech, not with one law that suddenly ends everything. It fades away step by step. One camera on the corner, one license plate reader over the road, one data sharing deal between agencies, one algorithm flagging an ordinary drive across town. People tell themselves they have nothing to hide until they realize the system isn't just looking for crimes. It's recording everyday life and judging the patterns inside it. Number 1. Hover cars. In Itchy and Scratchy, the movie, Season 4, Episode 6, the part that matters here is not Bart being banned from the film. It is the future jump. The episode flashes decades ahead and treats a hovercar future like it is already normal, just another piece of everyday life in Springfield. The show did not present it like a miracle or a grand reveal. It treated it like ordinary transportation after the world had quietly changed. And that is exactly why the idea feels different now. That shift is no longer just cartoon background art. In December 2025, the U.S. Department of Transportation released its Advanced Air Mobility National Strategy and said these new aircraft could redefine how people fly and how communities connect. Then on March 9, 2026, the DOT and FAA announced 8 selections under the eVTOL Integration Pilot Program to begin testing next-generation aircraft in real-world operations across the United States. That is the moment this stops sounding like concept art. Governments are not just watching anymore. They are building frameworks for actual operations in American airspace. The machines themselves make the Simpsons image feel a lot less ridiculous. On March 11, 2026, Joby announced that it had begun flight testing its first aircraft built to meet FAA standards. The company called it a major step toward certification and said FAA pilots are expected to start official test flights later this year. The FAA already has a regulatory pathway for powered lift commercial operations. That shows this technology is moving through real government oversight, not just investor hype. For a more direct flying car idea, the company Aleph has been promoting a road-legal vehicle concept designed to drive on streets, take off vertically, and fly over traffic. The FAA has already granted its prototype a special airworthiness certificate for limited research and development flights. These are not family hover cars parked in suburban driveways yet. But the gap between fantasy and real testing is getting smaller fast. The real question is who controls the low-altitude airspace once vehicles start leaving the road. Cities will have to deal with noise, safety, landing areas, traffic control, and accidents when the traffic is no longer beside you, but above you. The bigger issue is whether this becomes everyday transportation or just a fast sky lane for the wealthy. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.